In this video, we're going to be talking about some count functions, specifically the countif, the countifs, and then the count blanks. So let's dive right on into it. Essentially, what the count number is going to do is the count function is going to do is it's going to count how many numbers do we see. So in this particular case, we have a sheep herd right here. We have a sheep data, and each sheep has a number. So that's basically like their tag number. That's their number. So we can look and see how many are down here, and we have quite a few. But another thing to notice is that there's 206 rows, but there's 350 numbers. So obviously we skipped a couple of numbers in between. So let's go all the way back up to the top, and we're going to see how this count function works. So we're going to say equals count. And then we're just going to highlight how all of our data are not all of our data, but how many rows or how many numbers we're wanting to count. So we're going to start right here on row 7. We're just going to highlight all of the numbers all the way down. And as soon as we get done highlighting them all, we're going to close off a parenthesis. And we're going to press enter. And what it's going to do is it's going to tell us that there is actually 200 sheep in this flock right here. So we can be able to use that count function to count up how many numbers are in a data set instantaneously without having to go through and try to manually count or guess the number of rows. So next we're going to use a countif function. So we're going to want to count the number of animals that had greater than 3 lambs. So in order to do this, we're going to use the countif function. So we're going to use countif. And what this is it's going to then have us select a range and then give a criteria. So basically we're going to count up the number of that meet this criteria. So we're going to count the number of sheep that had 3 lambs and only that had 3 lambs, so at least greater than 2. So we're going to highlight all of this column right here, because this column right here that we're highlighting is the total number of lambs. So it says number of lambs born, so we're going to be counting that up. So we highlight that whole entire column, and now our criteria is going to be greater than 2. And close parenthesis. But it throws off an error. And the reason it throws off an error is it gives you this formula parse error. Whenever we are dealing with the countif function, if we want to say something like equals to or greater than 2, we actually have to put this into quotations. It almost reads it like a text, but it works very well. So basically we're going to count we're going to count the number of animals in this column that have greater than 2. So we see that only 3 sheep had 3 lambs. And if we scroll through real quick, we might be able to spot them. Although to me, those numbers start running together. There's one right there. There's another one. There should be one more somewhere in this data set. Right there. There are the 3 lambs that had 3. So we were able to count up effectively that quickly without having to search through the data how many animals had 3 lambs. So the next thing that we want to go ahead and count is the number. We want to now count the number of lambs that had at least 2 lambs and is younger than 4 years old. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use countifs. So we're going to use count if we're just counting something in general. We're going to use countif if we have just one criteria. We're going to use countifs if we have multiple criteria. So let's see how that looks. So our criteria range for number 1. First off, we want to count the number of sheep that had at least 2 lambs. So we're looking at the number of lambs that were born. And we want to say that it's going to be greater than, so then we're going to put a comma, and now we get criterion 1. And we want to say greater than 1. That's our first criteria. And remember, we got to put that in quotations. So we're going to say in quotations, greater than 1. Our criteria range 2 then is now we want to look at something else. We want to see that the number of lambs that had at least 2 lambs and is younger than 4 years old. So we want to know how many animals that are younger than 4 years old. So in this particular case, we have, this is the birth year right here. And let's assume that we're in 2019. So we're currently, when I'm making this video, we're actually in 2020. But whenever I originally made this data sheet, it was in the year 2019. So let's assume we're in 2019. So we're going to highlight this birth year. That's going to be our second criteria. And now, what is our criterion? So our criteria range is this number of years. When was the animal born? And our criteria now is we are going to want to pull out animals that are greater than 2015. That would put them at younger than 4 years old, assuming we're in the year 2019. So that's the numbers that you're going to want to use on this particular assignment. So if I press enter, we now have 37 lambs that had at least 2 lambs and that were younger than 4 years old. Now I want to go ahead and do one more. I want to use this count blank. So what does a count blank do? It's literally going to count the number of blanks. So I want to count the number of sheep that did not lamb. So every time that a sheep didn't lamb, or we didn't know that they lambed, it has a blank cell here. So we're going to count those. So we're going to use count blank. So then we highlight the number of lambs. Make sure you go all the way down to the bottom, close off parenthesis. And now we have 17 blank cells. We know we have 17 blank cells, indicating that we have 17 lambs out of this 200 that did not lamb at all. 3 of which had more than 3 lambs, and 37 of those sheep had at least 2 lambs and is younger than 4 years old. So you can use these count ifs if you have very big data sheets and you need to figure out some things like how many total animals do you have, and how many of them didn't calve or didn't lamb or didn't farrow. If you need to figure out some other things like, hey, one of our main criterion is, did they keep their calf and are they older than this? You can start doing and having a lot of those counts being done for you in a relatively short order by doing this.